This is an infrastructure article about a blind date working hard to survive in a chaotic world, also known as, I work on infrastructure in a chaotic era. Zhao Hanzhang encountered an accident on his way back to school from a blind date. As soon as he opened his eyes, he arrived at the chaotic Southern and Northern Dynasties. In this era where order was disrupted and etiquette and morality were all fed to dogs, there were also people who were unwilling to submit to fate, yearning for freedom, and striving optimistically in upward. Keywords of the novel.魏晋干饭人no pop-ups,魏晋干饭人txt complete collection download,魏晋干饭人latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. The Way of Life and Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The Way of Life and Death. Zhao Hanzhang followed the footsteps on the left to the elevator entrance. The other person was very considerate and even told her, Teacher Zhao, let's wait a moment. The elevator is only coming down from the 32nd floor now. Although a bit cold, it sounds very nice. It's a pity that they are in the same school, and rabbits don't like grass by the nest. I have heard from the students who came to the library to borrow books that Professor Fu from the mathematics department is very handsome, but they have little interaction. If I had known that Professor Fong was introducing professors from the same school, she would not have come. After all, her reputation in school is a bit special. It's a bit awkward at the moment. Zhao Hanzhang tilted his head slightly and smiled in the direction where he was, thinking, okay. As the voice fell, she heard someone whispering next to her, You're so handsome. The woman is also good-looking, very fitting. But the girl is weird. Is there something wrong with her eyes? It seems so. Zhao Hanzhang's face remained unchanged, with a faint smile on her face. Her eyes were lowered, and she noticed him gently supporting her elbow. Zhao Hanzhang turned his head in confusion and heard him say, Teacher Zhao, the elevator is here. Zhao Hanzhang smiled at him and listened to his footsteps as they entered the elevator together. The onlookers confirmed that there was something wrong with her eyes. Zhao Hanzhang tilted his head slightly when he heard that only the two of them had entered the elevator. As if sensing her confusion, Fu Tinghan explained, I heard there will be a 7-star celestial phenomenon tonight, and they will all go up to the observation deck, only we will go down. Zhao Hanzhang smiled and said, Professor Fu can also go and take a look. You don't need to give it to me. I can go back by myself. She pointed her eyes without hesitation and said, although I can't see, my travel is not affected. Fu Tinghan glanced into her eyes and said, I don't have much interest in astronomy, and will stop by. That's right, both of them live at school and it's really convenient. In the empty elevator, there were only the two of them. When Fu Tinghan was quiet, Zhao Hanzhang's entire world was black. She was really calm, but didn't like the feeling of being too dark, so she had nothing to say. I didn't expect Professor Fong to introduce Professor Fu, she said after hearing his cold, Zhao Hanzhang said, I didn't expect that the person mentioned by his teacher's mother was Teacher Zhao. She should have picked up Teacher Zhao when she came over. This is interesting. Zhao Hanzhang raised his eyebrows and was about to speak when he suddenly heard something, frowning slightly. Fu Tinghan noticed and asked, What's wrong? As the words fell, the elevator plummeted. Fu Tinghan instinctively went to help Zhao Hanzhang, while Zhao Hanzhang instinctively twisted his outstretched hand. When he raised his foot to kick, he reacted and quickly changed from twisting to grabbing, apologizing repeatedly, I'm sorry, I overreacted a bit. But the elevator suddenly descended, and she couldn't stand steadily. Before she could finish speaking, she fell towards him and pressed the person under her. The two fell together while holding each other. That's it, Professor Fu's impression of her is even worse. Fu Tinghan could see it, ignoring the pain in his arms. He held her tightly and stabilized his body, squatting and leaning against the elevator wall. After the elevator suddenly descended, it stopped, but they felt the elevator car still trembling incessantly. Zhao Hanzhang also heard the chaotic and noisy sounds outside. She keenly caught some sounds and frowned, saying, "It seems like an earthquake." Fu Tinghan looked out through the elevator. It was a sightseeing elevator, and he could see outside. Below, there was a lot of noise, and people kept running out of the building. His face changed slightly, he hugged her tightly, reached out to ring the bell, and only then did his hand touch the red button. The elevator quickly descended, and Zhao Hanzhang felt like he was floating around. Someone was holding her tightly, protecting her, and then there was a loud noise. There seemed to be a flash of light in front of him. She felt unbelievable. How could she possibly see light? She was blind for 14 years. Then came the excruciating pain. Before she could even think about whether she was dead or whether Fu Tinghan was also dead, she felt a bright white light squeezing into her eyes. Zhao Hanzhang trembled his eyelids and carefully opened his eyes. She was suddenly placed in an ancient cinema from the elevator. Zhao Hanzhang looked at the towering city wall standing in front of her in shock. People kept running past her, all dressed in ancient costumes and with frightened faces. Her gaze shifted left and she saw 3 or 4 rows of soldiers running towards the city gate with spears, directly driving those who were about to charge inside out. The ragged people were desperately pushing inside, and the soldiers remained steadfast. With their spears, they directly stabbed the people out. Zhao Hanzhang's gaze shrank, her hands trembled slightly, and she watched as the blood flowed and the person with widened eyes kept falling. She wanted to deceive herself by saying that even filming was impossible. The soldiers pushed out the group of people, and the city gate slowly closed in front of them, constantly receiving reinforcements from soldiers. But whether it was running, roaring, or bleeding to death in pain, she didn't hear a sound at all, and what seemed to be playing before her was a mime. Well, after she regained her sight blind, she became deaf. For a moment, Zhao Hanzhang didn't even know whether it was better to be blind or deaf. She looked down at her hands and clothes. She was wearing a white dress with a red belt tied around her waist. This was the belt her roommate had chosen for her before she left this afternoon, knowing she was going on a blind date. It is said that the red belt tied to her white dress makes her waist appear plump, and as long as the other person is not blind, they will definitely be tempted. So is this in reality, or in a dream? Can a falling elevator not only change time and space, but also restore people's eyes? Zhao Hanzhang clenched her fist and also pinched her hand. Feeling something, her eyes lit up slightly. When she saw someone running past her, she reached out to grab it and said, "Thank you." Her hand passed directly through the other person's hand, but the other person didn't look at her and ran over to her. Zhao Hanzhang was taken aback for a moment before realizing the abnormality. Even though she couldn't hear any sound, she was standing here and the people around her were running around as if they couldn't see her. She reached out and gestured in front of several people, trying to catch their attention. "Hello, thank you, sir, brother." Everyone didn't react to her. Great. She's not only deaf but also invisible now, so this is a dream. Just as Zhao Hanzhang was about to firmly believe that it was a dream, a group of people rushed past her carrying a stretcher. When Zhao Hanzhang turned his head, he was facing the little girl lying on the stretcher. That was a little girl in her teens, dressed in a red beard, lying on a stretcher with her eyes tightly closed. Her forehead was covered in blood, but Zhao Hanzhang still recognized her at a glance. No, she didn't recognize each other. She didn't know who she was, but she looked very similar to her when she was in her teens. At that time, she wasn't blind yet. At the moment when her gaze fell on her, Zhao Hanzhang seemed to hear a boom sound, and then something shattered, and the noisy sound rushed into her ears. Zhao Hanzhang heard it. "San Yang, wake up. San Yang, wake up. Hurry up and send her back to the mansion. Go and get a doctor right away." Zhao Hanzhang followed the stretcher for 2 steps in a daze and heard a surprised voice, "Teacher Zhao." Zhao Hanzhang turned around and saw a handsome young man in a suit standing in the crowd, looking at him. He probably just saw her and walked towards her excitedly. But after only 2 steps, he suddenly disappeared from sight. Zhao Hanzhang's pupils contracted slightly, and he couldn't help but step forward. Professor Fu. But then it turned black in front of her, and she lost consciousness in an instant. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Grandfather. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Grandfather Zhao Hanzhang took the medicine handed over by the maid and drank it all in one gulp. He took a preserved fruit in his mouth and returned the medicine bowl to her. He asked, "Did you hear about it? Did any of the injured people suffer from amnesia like me this time?" The maid shook her head and said, "Hui San Yang, I've never heard of it. Did the news of my injury and amnesia spread?" Listening to he looking at her with some sadness, "I have already followed San Yang's instructions and told the outside world, but they don't seem to believe me much." Zhao Hanzhang doesn't care if they believe it or not. She just wants Professor Fu to know that there is a girl in the Zhao family who has amnesia. I don't know if Professor Fu has her good luck. Is she still floating, or just like her, borrowing a corpse to revive her soul? Not bad, she regained her soul through borrowing a corpse. 10 days after waking up, she thought of various ways to verify that she was possessed by this little girl who looked very similar to her. The little girl, also surnamed Zhao, ranks third in the family and is known as San Yang. She is only 14 years old this year. She is too young to feel comfortable occupying her body, so she often calls out to her at night, wanting her to come back and continue her life. She lived for at least 28 years, enduring hardships, but also enjoying blessings. Although she passed away at an early age, it was her who had an accident, and the consequences naturally had to be borne by her. She couldn't go to another world and still occupy people's bodies. This cause and effect is too great for Zhao Hanzhang to bear. Unfortunately, no matter how she called out, the child just didn't appear, his body was empty, and there was not a single soul left. Zhao Hanzhang could only shift his attention to Professor Fu. Although he only looked back that day, the man in a suit who could see her and even called her teacher Zhao must have been Professor Fu who had an accident with her. He's really handsome, no wonder the students always privately discuss his good looks. I don't know if he's lucky or not. If he's possessed by a corpse like her, I don't know what his identity is. Can he hear the news she released and come find her? If she wasn't possessed, could she see him now that she's human? Zhao Hanzhang, as usual, was worried every day. After hearing he put away the medicine bowl, he came back and said, "San Yang, Nyang, and Si Nyang are seeking to see each other outside." "No," Zhao Hanzhang refused without lifting his head, "just say that I feel a headache when I see them." Tingyi fell silent for a moment, then bent down and withdrew. Zhao Hanzhang lay in bed and sighed. Although she was not the original owner, she still had her memories, so it was not considered amnesia. When she doesn't think about it, she doesn't know, but as long as she thinks about it, relevant memories will appear in her mind. When she sees the people the original owner knew before, the memories of the past will slowly emerge, similar to Baidu search. But Baidu search also takes time, let alone time to read and accept, so she always cannot recognize people in the first place, and the reaction time is a bit long. Therefore, Zhao Hanzhang simply claimed to have amnesia. Anyway, she did hurt her head, and indeed, I don't really remember. Unfortunately, it seems that everyone doesn't quite believe that she has lost her memory. Zhao Sanyang, her maiden name is Hezhen. Not long ago, she turned 14 years old, so there's no need to mention her father because he died early and didn't have much fame. It is worth mentioning her grandfather. Her grandfather Zhao Changyu was famous throughout the country, with the title of Kaibo. He served as the Minister of State and was known for his clean and simple administration. He only had one son, her father, but he died. There is only one grandson, who is her younger brother named Zhao Yong. He is only 12 years old this year, but he is not very intelligent. This is a euphemism. At the age of 12, besides his own name, he also knows the names of his father, mother, sister, and grandfather. There is also a repeated Zhao character at the beginning. So Zhao Changyu wanted to hand over the title to his nephew, Zhao Ji, the cousin of Zhao Sanyang. But recently there were rumors in the government that Zhao Changyu was going to tell Zhao Sanyang about a prestigious marriage, in order to ensure that his own grandson Zhao Yong would inherit the title and not let his family's property go missing. As soon as the rumors started, Zhao Changyu had not had time to deal with them. At the age of only 12, Zhao Yong took people out of the city to hunt. A new emperor had just changed his head, and outside the city, there were chaotic armies and refugees everywhere. A nobleman with poor intelligence who left the city at this time was equivalent to being sent away for nothing. The little girl heard that her younger brother had left the city, so she immediately took someone out of the city to find her. She was caught in a big chaos outside the city, and in order to save Zhao Yong, she fell off her horse. When she was carried back, she was already out of breath. She had an accident in the elevator, and as soon as she opened her eyes, she was in this world. Then she closed her eyes, and as soon as she opened her eyes, she woke up from this body. In the past 10 days, she has been unremittingly trying to see her second and fourth nyangs, both daughters of Zhao Ji, and her cousin, Zhao Hanzhang, has not figured out the way to go, so she doesn't want to see them. She wants to find Professor Fu first. Traversing this kind of thing is already very magical, and she still borrows a corpse to revive her soul. Perhaps Professor Fu, who is extremely intelligent, can find some pattern from this matter to make them wear it back. I don't know how their bodies are doing in the elevator. They should still be able to survive if they go back, right? Zhao Hanzhang was somewhat worried, his hands and feet spread out, and he didn't want to move anymore. Upon hearing Tinggi's hurried in, Zhao Hanzhang closed his eyes and said, "Didn't you say it's gone? Sanyang, it's Lang who mainly sees you." Zhao Hanzhang opened his eyes and sat up from the bed, "Grandfather." "Yes, Qingbo brought someone to pick you up." Qingbo is the confidant of his grandfather and has been accompanying him all along. Now, the big butler in the mansion is only his younger brother. Zhao Hanzhang lowered his eyes and thought for a moment before saying, "Bring your clothes to change." Others may not see him, but Zhao Changyu cannot. He is the head of the family. He quickly pulled out a half-worn family uniform and changed it for Zhao Hanzhang. Zhao Hanzhang was satisfied and gave her a approving glance. After changing his clothes, four sturdy servants carried Zhao Hanzhang into the carriage and carried him out. Oh, I forgot to say. She fell from a horse and not only injured her head, but also her leg. It wasn't particularly serious, but the noblewoman had to rest in bed due to her injuries. A mother who dared to move her body would cry, like someone who could hold her and cry for a day and a night. So these days Zhao Hanzhang has been very obedient, able to lie down without sitting, and able to sit without standing. This is the first time she has walked out, no, she has carried it out, of her own yard. Along the way, there are colorful flowers, spring scenery, and butterflies fluttering. It can be seen that the yard of this house is well taken care of. As they carried them all the way, all the servants they saw on the way bowed their heads and retreated to the side, waiting for them to sit a long distance before daring to stand up slightly and continue with their tasks. The more you reach the main courtyard, the more respectful the servants you encounter on the way. The gate of the main courtyard was opened, and a wudong tree was planted in the courtyard. At this time, the branches of wudong tree were luxuriant, and there was a table, a thin and handsome. Middle-aged people were sitting at the table. As soon as Zhao Hanzhang saw him, a picture of the grandparents and grandchildren living together in the past came to his mind. Oh my goodness, this handsome middle-aged man is actually her grandfather. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Words and Chapters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Words and Chapters. Zhao Hanzhang didn't shout too loudly, so his face became cold and stern. She was carried to the table by the servant and placed down. The servant wanted to hold her and sit on a chair. She raised her hand to stop and helped Tinggi's hand get up, bowing to Zhao Changyu with some instability. "Grandfather," she said, "you have to call even if you don't call." Zhao Changyu frowned and glanced at her leg before saying, "Why do you need to perform this courtesy? Your legs and feet are inconvenient. Protecting yourself is filial piety. Please sit down quickly." "Yes." Zhao Hanzhang sat respectfully across from him, looking down at the teapot on the table. Zhao Changyu carefully examined her, and in fact, they didn't spend much time together. He was busy with national affairs and had some negligence in family matters. But that doesn't mean he doesn't know his two grandchildren, on the contrary. Although their ancestors and grandchildren don't often meet, he has inquired and understood what books they read, their temperament, and even their food and clothing. So he knew that his grandson was born dull, but his granddaughter was very intelligent and tenacious, because the family had decided to give the title to Heir Fong. The child had always been tolerant to Heir Fong's brothers and sisters, and was a very sensible child. But her response this time was very different from before, with a bit more dominance and a bit less patience. Zhao Hanzhang lowered his head, and Zhao Changyu couldn't see the expression on her face. He could only look at her head and say, "I heard from Cheng Bo that you have amnesia." Zhao Hanzhang paused before giving a definite answer, "Yes." Zhao Changyu couldn't help but smile and said, "Lift your head and answer." Zhao Hanzhang lifted his head and looked at the person across from him, his eyes clear and firm, without changing his words. Zhao Changyu looked at her face and asked, "I have amnesia, do you remember anything else?" After thinking for a moment, Zhao Hanzhang said, "Do you still remember my younger brother, mother, and grandfather?" The smile on Zhao Changyu's face gradually faded, and his fingers lightly tapped on the stone table. After a long time, he said, "My intention was to say a prestigious marriage for you. The country is chaotic, the people are displaced, and there is a prominent marriage that can not only protect yourself, but also protect your younger brother." He said, "Emperor Hui is a lesson from his past experiences. I never thought about letting your brother inherit the Earl's mansion. I think I can offer you a prominent family, and even if the Earl's mansion cannot be relied on in the future, your siblings can still be safe and sound." Zhao Hanzhang said, "Grandfather, if you can't even trust your close relatives like uncles, how can you trust the in-laws who have been added halfway?" Zhao Changyu remained silent. Zhao Hanzhang said, "If Emperor Wu does not establish Emperor Hui, can Emperor Hui live well?" Zhao Changyu frowned and his gaze became sharp. "Do you want your brother to inherit the count?" "No," Zhao Hanzhang said, "back then, my grandfather advised Emperor Wu not to establish Emperor Hui. My granddaughter agreed with your point of view. Emperor Hui is pure and ancient, and cannot be a ruler of a country. If Emperor Wu had listened to your advice, then the great Jin would not have suffered the same disaster today." Saying that Emperor Hui was honest and foolish was the original saying of Zhao Changyu back then, which actually means that Emperor Hui was too honest and foolish to be suitable for being an emperor. After waking up, Zhao Hanzhang was not only surprised by the fact that she had borrowed a corpse to revive her soul, but also surprised by the historical juncture she was currently at. Additionally, the little girl she possessed was actually the grandson of the famous Zhao Qiao of the Jin dynasty. Last November, Emperor Hui of Jin suddenly passed away in Luoyang, and then his younger brother ascended to the throne, naming him Yongjia. It is now February of the first year of Yongjia, and less than 3 months after the new emperor ascended the throne, there are chaotic armies and refugees everywhere outside the city. She earnestly said to Zhao Changyu, "My younger brother is foolish. He cannot carry forward the glory of his clan, nor can he protect his family. His grandfather's decision was not wrong, and he cannot indeed inherit the count. Handing over the Earl's mansion to Zhao Yong may result in the same outcome as handing over the country to Emperor Hui. Not to mention the glory of the Zhao family, it is feared that the foundation of the clan will be damaged." Zhao Changyu's face looked better. "But grandfather, if he hands over all of our long house to the second room, is it really worth entrusting to the second room? This is not only her question, but also the question that the original body has always wanted to ask. This question was pressing in her heart, constantly questioning and searching for an answer, but it wasn't until she chased out of the city to save her brother that she found the answer. It was just that she didn't have time to talk to her grandfather. Now Zhao Hanzhang asked on her behalf, "It's just a rumor that hasn't been confirmed yet." Uncle didn't come to confirm it with Grandpa, and Uncle didn't ask any questions. As if he didn't know about this matter, Erlang went out of the city and almost died outside the city. Can Grandpa trust his mother and our siblings to be entrusted to Erfang like this? Zhao Changyu clenched the teacup in his hand and pursed it tightly at the corner of his mouth. His heart felt as if it was being rolled over by hot oil. After a long time, he said with difficulty, "It's hard to stand alone. If you don't rely on your family and the second wife, it's probably difficult for your siblings to survive in this world." He let out a long sigh and said, although the new emperor ascended to the throne, he could not govern independently. There was internal turmoil and injustice, as well as external disturbances caused by the Xiongnu. The Jiehu and Chang ethnic groups were also eyeing the chaos. The world saw great chaos. If you don't rely on your family, how can you survive in this chaotic era? Zhao Hanzhang remembered the lingering soul that could not be summoned back no matter how hard it was, and asked with some sadness, "What if we rely on the reverse to take our lives?" Zhao Changyu looked at Chengbo, the only one left in the yard. Chengbo understood and immediately went into the room to take out a folding paper. Zhao Changyu pressed the fold on the table and said, "This is the fold to appoint Zhao Ji as the crown prince. Once this fold is placed, it will reassure their hearts." This is indeed a solution, but Zhao Hanzhang's gaze lifted from the fold and met Zhao Changyu's gaze. There is no conflict of interest anymore. Uncle and uncle naturally don't want us to have a meal, but there will always be times when interests are related. Grandfather also said, the world is going to be chaotic. In this chaotic world, can we really rely on others? Zhao Changyu looked at the firmness in her eyes and exclaimed in surprise, "So what do you want?" Zhao Hanzhang said, "Strength is safest only when held in one's own hands. Relying on anyone is not as reliable as oneself." Zhao Changyu looked at her in surprise. After a while, he looked up and burst into laughter, his eyes shining brightly. Okay. She is truly my granddaughter of Zhao Changyu." He got up and turned around 2 times. At the last time, he patted the wudong tree, stood in front of her, looked at her with bright eyes, and said, "You have grown up, I remember correctly. You will have a hairpin next year, right?" Too young, Zhao Hanzhang, who was already 28 years old, nodded with tears in his eyes and said, "Yes." Zhao Changyu reached out and gently patted her head, looking at her gently and saying, Okay. Grandfather may not see you and your hairpin anymore. I'll take a small character for you in advance." Zhao Hanzhang was taken aback for a moment, lowered his eyes and thought for a while before saying, "Grandfather, can I take a small character for myself?" She still wants to call her original name. Zhao Changyu smiled and said, "Don't you listen to the small characters I took for you first. I think you will definitely like them." Zhao Hanzhang smiled and waited for him to say. Zhao Changyu looked at her gently and said, "Back then, your father named you Heijin through divination. The Kun hexagram was taken from the Book of Changes, and today I will take the 2 characters Hanzhang for you as small characters." Zhao Hanzhang stared at him in a daze, her eyes gradually moistening. She held back her tears and murmured in a somewhat hoarse voice, "Hanzhang is chaste." Her father also named her from this back then. That's right, Zhao Changyu looked at her with a smile. It's commendable to have a virtuous seal, so it's important to know when it's time to make a name for yourself. Perhaps it's important to learn from the royal affairs and understand the greatness of the country. Heijin, you are a good child. My granddaughter has always had virtues, but she never shows off. My grandfather hopes that you can do the same in the future and have a good result. Zhao Changyu said with some sadness. He had always known that this child was intelligent, but he didn't take it to heart. If it weren't for the sharpness she showed this time, he would have almost missed her and also missed the entire Zhao family's long house. The new book has opened, please give it a lot of support and collect recommended monthly tickets for me. I originally only wanted to update 2 chapters, but I realized that the previously pre-open collection chapter was also counted as 1 chapter, which caused a bit of OCD, so I came up to replace it. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Zhao Erlang. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Zhao Erlang. After getting excited, Zhao Changyu's face turned slightly sickly red. He covered his chest and slowly sat down at the table, saying to her, "You go back first. Grandfather needs to think carefully about your future path." He said, "Don't tell anyone about today, including your mother. Zhao Hanzhang should go down." Zhao Changyu paused for a moment and said, "Since you said you have amnesia, then let's forget." Zhao Changyu doesn't believe that his granddaughter has lost her memory, he just thinks she's trying to use this to suppress the second wife. Previously, he didn't quite approve of this move in his heart, but now well, if the child wants to do this, then let's do it. Zhao Hanzhang returned to his yard and climbed back onto the bed to rest. The soul of this body seems to have really dispersed. She doesn't know if she and Professor Fu can go back to modern times, but it's obvious that the original owner can't come back. So, when she resides in this body, she wants to do something for her, for the people she cares about. Consider it as borrowing her body's rent. And she also wants to be more comfortable and better herself. The second house of the Zhao family obviously cannot be relied on. Instead of relying on them for hope, it is better to follow the little girl's inner thoughts. They should at least have the ability to protect themselves when they stand up on their own. Zhao Hanzhang went through his previous response in his mind again, and after confirming that there were no problems, he slid down and sighed, "I'm hungry." Brainstorming makes the stomach hungry quickly. Zhao Hanzhang shouted outside, "Listen to the lotus. What does Sanyang want?" He hurriedly came in, "Eat, go to the kitchen and get some tea, I'm hungry." Listening to he smile and respond, he turned around and left. After Sanyang was injured, although she was still worried, her appetite was much better than before. The dim sum in the kitchen of the Zhao family is naturally very delicious. The dim sum sent by Tingyi is very fond of her. Obviously, her taste is similar to that of the little girl. As she was eating, a maid walked in and said, "Sanyang, Dr. Chen is here." Zhao Hanzhang bit the dim sum for a moment, put it down and asked Tingyi to put it away. "Who asked the doctor?" Thinking about how to deal with it, the little maid said, "It was brought by Uncle Cheng, and it was said that the Langzhu sent someone to invite it." Zhao Hanzhang stopped Tingyi and took the dim sum back to eat. "Please invite him in." Dr. Chen came in with the medicine box. What he saw was a little girl sitting on the couch eating dim sum. When he saw him coming, he waved, "Dr. Chen, would you like to have some tea first?" "Dr. Chen." He looked at Cheng Bo with suspicion and said, "Is this the third wife of the mansion?" Yes, although Cheng Bo was also surprised, he quickly restrained his expression and bent down, saying, "Please ask the imperial physician to diagnose my third mother." Dr. Chen could only come forward, and Zhao Hanzhang was also obedient. He put down the dim sum and stretched out his hand, asking what to answer. "Sanyang still can't remember anything." "Not really, I can vaguely recall some of it," Zhao Hanzhang said. "The picture of someone running to report Erlang out of the city to me always flashes in my mind, but then there is chaos. If I think about it more carefully, my head hurts and my heart beats faster." Dr. Chen touched her pulse and stared at her, asking, "What about that person? Do you recognize anyone?" Zhao Hanzhang sighed, "Besides Erlang, I still vaguely remember the girl who came to report the news, but I only remember her appearance and not her name." "Don't you even remember your parents and brothers and sisters?" Zhao Hanzhang sighed and answered with concern, "I don't know when I will remember." My mother cries so hard every day when she comes to see me. It was so easy today to calm me down and rest. After observing her silence for a while, Dr. Chen withdrew his hand and said, Son Young, rest well. Since she can't remember, don't think hard to avoid worsening the condition. He said, take good care of your body first. When the time comes, you will naturally remember. Zhao Hanzhang was deeply convinced and obediently nodded in response with a yes. After leaving behind a prescription, Dr. Chen left, and Qing Buchong bent over to follow Dr. Zhao Hanzhang out. As soon as Dr. Chen left, the mother of the little girl, Wang Shi, rushed over. Her eyes were still red and swollen, and it was obvious that she cried again after being persuaded back by Zhao Hanzhang. As soon as she entered the door, she stared closely at Zhao Hanzhang and quickly stepped forward. San Yang, what did Dr. Chen say? Zhao Hanzhang leaned back on the bed, pretending to be weak. The imperial physician said it's not a big deal, it's just that he doesn't remember anything yet. Wang's eyes turned red again, and she held Zhao Hanzhang's hand in tears, my poor child. Zhao Hanzhang allowed her to hold on, and in front of her, the word, mother, couldn't be shouted out. This sister was about her age, and in fact, she was also. Although her daughter is already 14 years old, she is still in the prime of her life, only 2 years older than before. Zhao Hanzhang couldn't shout out, Nyang, but couldn't see the girl cry, so he quickly shook her hand and opened the topic, how is Erlang? Wang's tears subsided for a moment, and she wiped her eyes dry with a handkerchief, saying, you're still kneeling in the ancestral hall. Your grandfather has been imposing this time, and he personally punished him. She paused for a moment and lowered her voice, saying, not only Erlang, but also the aunties in the second room are kneeling in the temple. Although your grandfather did not stop us from delivering food and drinks, he did not allow them to leave the temple. Every day, not only did he kneel, but he also had to memorize family teachings and genealogies. As you know, Erlang is foolish and can recite some genealogies, but family teachings. Zhao Hanzhang pondered in his heart that Erlang, his younger brother Zhao Yong, was only 12 years old this year. After thinking for a moment, she looked at Tingyi and said, go find Qingbo and tell him that I took the medicine and fell asleep, but accidentally had a nightmare. I was sweating all over and calling out to Erlang, begging him to let Erlang come and see me. Tingyi looked at the girl with a relatively rosy complexion and hesitated to speak. After a while, he still bent his knees and agreed. Qinggu, who followed Wang, immediately said, I will go with you. Wang was restless and asked Zhao Hanzhang, isn't this deceiving your grandfather? If your grandfather finds out. Zhao Hanzhang comforted her and said, it's okay, what can we hide from our grandfather in this courtyard? If he doesn't want to, he will make Qingbo refuse. Qingbo did not refuse, so Zhao Erlang, who had a pale face and couldn't even stand upright on his knees, was helped to be sent to Zhao Hanzhang's Qingyi pavilion, leaving only Zhao Auntie Zhao Huan in the temple. Zhao Erlang was escorted in, and apart from his memory, this was the first time Zhao Hanzhang had seen this cheap younger brother in reality. The 12-year-old boy was tall and burly, with a chubby face and baby fat. As soon as he entered the door, his gaze touched his sister sitting on the bed. Without warning, he opened his mouth and began to cry, sister, sister, wow. Zhao Hanzhang was startled, and Wang also began to cry. She ran forward and hugged her son, Erlang. Zhao Erlang cried loudly, tears streaming down his face like a burst river. His eyes were tightly closed, and he was helped by servants to the bedside to touch Zhao Hanzhang. His crying only began to subside, but he still cried very sadly. While crying, I reluctantly opened my eyes to look at Zhao Hanzhang. Looking at her, I cried even louder. Zhao Hanzhang. See you tomorrow, by Yubiu, end of this chapter. Chapter 5. Disgusting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Disgusting. Zhao Hanzhang resigned and opened his hand to embrace Zhao Erlang, patting his back to soothe him. After a long time, Zhao Erlang slowly stopped crying and timidly opened his eyes to look at Zhao Hanzhang. You. He looked at her suspiciously and said, "Are you my sister?" Zhao Hanzhang was surprised in his heart, but remained calm on his face. "I don't remember, but they said yes," he said. She looked up and down at Zhao Erlang and said, "I have seen you in my memory. I vaguely remember when you stood on a rockery in the garden and urinated in the wind, and ended up peeing on another person's head." Wang coughed violently and said, "That was 2 years ago. San Yang, you forgot. Your younger brother was still young at that time." Zhao Erlang, however, did not blush. In his limited memory, he also remembered this incident. He was happy and nodded fiercely, "Yes, it was me. Because of this, Sister A chased me 2 streets with a whip and caught me and beat me up a lot." He instinctively reached out and touched his buttocks, feeling a bit aggrieved. "It hurts so much," he said. Zhao Hanzhang. "Does it still hurt now?" Zhao Erlang nodded. Zhao Hanzhang reached out and poked his knee. "What's going on here?" Zhao Erlang let out a hiss, his face trembling with pain, and he couldn't help but shrink back. Wang felt heartbroken upon seeing it. Zhao Hanzhang withdrew his fingers and said to Tingyi, "Go and tidy up the side room, let Erlang stay here, and have someone go out of the mansion to invite a doctor. He has been kneeling for so long, and his legs need to be treated properly. Don't kneel and break them. Listen to the lotus." Wang hesitated and said, "Although Erlang has a young mind, he is not young anymore. Isn't it not good for him to still live in your courtyard?" "Who would say anything? Living in a side room is not living in the same room," Zhao Hanzhang said. "It's just that something happened. I don't feel at ease letting him go to the front yard. Let him live with me." Wang was also afraid that he would be tempted to do something wrong again, so Zhao Hanzhang agreed as soon as she tried to persuade her. Zhao Erlang covered his sore knees with both hands and confirmed, "You are my elder sister." Only his elder sister would poke him in pain like this. Zhao Hanzhang looked at him with some complexity, unsure whether to praise him for his intelligence or say he was foolish. "How could I trust her so easily, even though I suspect her?" Zhao Erlang lived in Qingyi Pavilion, and Zhao Changyu, the head of the Zhao family, didn't say a word. Even if others had objections, they could only hold them back, but Zhao Auntie was still kneeling in the ancestral hall. The elders of Erfang who had been sitting firmly in Mount Taishan could not sit still. At dinner in the evening, the people from the second room came together, except for her uncle whom she had never met before. The food was just set on the table, and Zhao Hanzhang comfortably had someone lift it to the edge of the table. As soon as he sat down, a servant came in and reported, "Second madam, third madam. The eldest master and eldest lady have brought second madam and fourth madam to come and see third madam." Zhao Hanzhang looked at the Wang family. Wang put down her chopsticks and wiped her mouth with a handkerchief, saying, "Please let them in." If only the second and fourth mothers came over, they could have used the previous excuse to disappear, but if the elders came over, it would be difficult to close the door and disappear again. Wang sat at the table waiting, and Zhao Erlang quickly took a bite into his mouth. Then he obediently placed his hand on his knee and sat down, indicating that the etiquette was good and had been taught at home. Zhao Ji brought his wife and daughter in, and Wang reluctantly led Zhao Erlang to stand up and salute. Only Zhao Hanzhang sat steadily on the couch due to his leg injury, not moving or feeling cramped. As soon as Zhao Ji came in, he saw her. He fixed his gaze and met the curious gaze that Zhao Hanzhang had cast upon him. Zhao Hanzhang didn't hide his scrutinizing gaze and looked at Zhao Ji very arrogantly, then at his wife, and then at the 2 little girls behind him. Zhao Ji was taken aback by her gaze as she looked at him unfamiliarly. Zhao Ji's eyebrows furrowed slightly. Is it really amnesia? Looking at the 4 members of this family, Zhao Hanzhang slowly aligned them with the person in his memory. Too many memories popped up, causing her headache to almost crack open. Zhao Hanzhang's face turned pale, and his forehead was slightly sweating. Zhao Ji was looking at her when he first noticed her abnormality. After a moment of confusion, he quickly asked, "What's wrong with Sanyang?" Ting he also noticed and quickly stepped forward to support Zhao Hanzhang, anxiously saying, "Did Sanyang have another headache?" This pain is nothing to Zhao Hanzhang, she can tolerate it, but facing Zhao Ji's skeptical gaze, Zhao Hanzhang thought to himself, why did she have to endure it? So she opened the floodgates of her memories, letting the memories and emotions that emerged after seeing them drown her. Her face turned pale like snow, and cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She vomited it out in a whoosh. This intense reaction doesn't seem like it can be pretended at all. Zhao Ji felt uneasy in his heart. He thought that Zhao Hanzhang's amnesia was just a pretense, in order for the uncle to punish them, but now it seems that she has truly lost her memory. Zhao Hanzhang vomited for a while, causing chaos among the maids and servants in the room. After the memories in her mind calmed down a bit, she looked up at Zhao Ji's family of 4, only to see Zhao Yi coming in from behind them. She immediately changed her focus and extended her fingers, trembling and pointing at Zhao Yi, you, I remember you. Before she could finish a sentence, she twisted her head and fainted. Zhao Yi, Zhao Dalang, Zhao Ji's only son at present, is much better off to him than to his 2 daughters. After throwing the bomb, Zhao Hanzhang confidently installed himself unconscious. However, Wang was unaware of the situation. When she saw her daughter faint, she was shocked and rushed forward to hug her. "Sanyang, what's wrong with you? Go and call the doctor." Ting he was also frightened and was about to run out. He was caught by Qin Gu and said, "Hurry up and invite Lord Lang, please invite the imperial physician to take a look. The doctors outside are useless. Listen to He Ying and turn around to run outside." Zhao Erlang felt dizzy when he saw his sister say she was unconscious, and he was also frightened. When Wang called out, tears welled up. He squeezed up and tightly grabbed Zhao Hanzhang's hand. The more he looked at her, the more he felt her face turn pale, much like the dead person he saw a few days ago. He couldn't help but cry, "Ah jia, ah jia." Wang was originally stable, but when her son cried, she also felt sad and couldn't help but cry while holding Zhao Hanzhang. Zhao Hanzhang. She couldn't help but scratch Wang's palm with her other hand. Wang, who was crying so hard, didn't feel it, so Zhao Hanzhang could only pinch it. Wang. She reacted and lowered her head in tears to look at her daughter, only to see Zhao Hanzhang slightly open his eyes, meet her, and then tightly close them. Wang understood and hugged Zhao Hanzhang, crying loudly. The servants in the room heard this and began to cry softly, feeling sad. Only Qinggu is still useful. While asking someone to fetch hot water and find the medicine for Sanyang to take, she also needs to send someone to the door to see if the doctor has arrived. Zhao Ji and his wife and children suddenly froze in the same place, and the chaos and sadness in the room avoided them. This scene could be interpreted by anyone as the orphan and widowed mother of the second house coming to bully the eldest house. The second room crowd, who have been speaking to the Communist Party of China since entering the room, said, "I am the happy editor, spinning and jumping." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Needles. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Needles. Zhao Ji's forehead twitched slightly, and when he realized it, he immediately shouted at his son, "What are you still staring at? Your third sister remembers you, but you only know how to stand. Why don't you go up and look at your sister?" The eldest lady also reacted and quickly stepped forward to help Wang, who was crying uncontrollably. "Sister-in-law, this is a good thing. Previously, I was afraid that Sanyang wouldn't remember people. It seems that she is improving and can remember her brother now. Next, it's time to think of you, sister-in-law." Wang tightly hugged Zhao Hanzhang and cried, "If I had remembered something so uncomfortable from before, I would rather she never remembered it. To deceive ghosts, does Sanyang seem to remember fainting because Zhao Dalang was good? It's clear that Zhao Dalang bullied her before. Although she doesn't remember how Zhao Daolang bullied Sanyang, since Sanyang said there was, it was. Sanyang is not really suffering from amnesia. That's right, Wang doesn't think her daughter has lost her memory either. After all, she can remember her and Erlang, and also recognize Tingyi and Qinggu around her, but her reaction is a bit slower than before. But she knocked her head and broke her leg, and it's normal for her to react slowly in sadness and pain. Memory loss can be pretended, vomiting and turning pale, but not. Wang touched Zhao Hanzhang's hair, tears dripping down with heartache. Child, I only wish you and Erlang peace, health and happiness. I don't insist on anything else, she said. Although Wang didn't understand her daughter's plan in her heart, she pretended to be unconscious and pointed at Zhao Yi's phone call, clearly expressing her dissatisfaction with the second room. When it comes to dissatisfaction, Wang has already accumulated a lot, but it has always been hindered by her father-in-law's reluctance to act. In addition, her daughter used to always persuade her, so she has been enduring it. This time, because Erfang instigated Erlang to leave the city, causing her and her children to almost die, she had long hated them. However, it was because my father-in-law did not change his original intention and still wanted to pass on the title to the second wife. In the future, their family would have to look up to the second wife and breathe heavily, which was why they had to endure it. Now even her daughter resisted, and Wang couldn't suppress her resentment. She turned around and grabbed Zhao Yi, who was pushed up by Zhao Ji. Daolang, your third younger sister is 1 year younger than you. If she does anything wrong, tell your aunt that I will punish her and please don't scare her. Wang cried, in the future, this whole family will belong to you. We orphans and widows only want a bowl of soup to drink, as long as we can live safely. We dare not argue with you for anything. Zhao Ji and Wu's faces turned pale when Wang's strange and sinister remarks made Zhao Ji unable to resist and shouted loudly, what does younger sister mean? Wang shrank and hugged Zhao Erlang and Zhao Hanzhang in her arms. The mother and son huddled together, afraid to cry loudly. Uncle. I said the wrong thing. Zhao Ji's whole face turned black, but in the eyes of the servants, the old master appeared even more terrifying. Seeing the frightened eyes of the people, the eldest lady Wu reacted and went to appease Wang. What are your brothers and sisters saying? They are brothers and sisters. They are of the same blood. They will help each other and love each other in the future. Wang lowered her eyes and said in a low voice, what sister-in-law said is, I don't ask for anything else, as long as my children are safe. She hugged her 2 children tightly and thought of the blood on her face and weak breath when Sanyang brought them back. She was on the verge of death for a while, and then straightened her back slightly. She looked up at Wu Shi with a fierce gaze. Sanyang and Erlang are my heartstrings. For their sake, I can even give up my life. It's best for sister-in-law to remember today's words, otherwise, even if I go to hell, I have to break free from the chains and come back. Wu was frightened by her gaze and the ferocity in her words, and couldn't speak for a while. Zhao Ji was blocked by the Wu family, only hearing words but not seeing the Wang family's situation. He couldn't help but feel angry and his tone also cooled down. What does this mean, younger siblings? Are you suspecting that Sanyang's horse fall was caused by our second wife? Wang clenched the handkerchief in her hand and cried, Uncle, Auntie is still kneeling in the temple. We both know why she knelt. Zhao Ji's face turned blue, he clenched his fist, and said in a cold voice, why don't you tell me why she's kneeling? Wang hugged Zhao Hanzhang tightly, trembling slightly with fear. Zhao Ji said angrily, it's time to clean up the servants around the younger brothers and sisters. It's all these picky people who are provoking around, and many misunderstandings have arisen between their brothers and sisters. He said in a deep voice, Erlang himself doesn't even understand why he went out of the city. If Auntie accidentally found out about this, she naturally wanted to tell Sanyang. It's better for siblings to think about it. If Auntie hadn't told Sanyang about this, could Sanyang have gone to retrieve Erlang in time? With so many refugees and rebels outside the city, wouldn't she have swallowed him alive? Zhao Ji said, "My younger siblings not only don't care about my aunt's kindness, but also believe in rumors outside. They think it's because my aunt seduced Erlang to leave the city. Now that the new emperor ascends the throne and the situation in the court is changing, my uncle has to temporarily stay at home to recuperate to avoid chaos in the court. In such a situation, my younger siblings' internal turmoil is not in line with the intentions of those who provoke petty people." He glared sharply at the young lady beside him and ordered, "I think my younger siblings were instigated by those around me. Someone, take these stubborn slaves down." The young ladies were startled and trembled as they knelt on the ground. Wang was also startled and quickly extended an arm to stop. "This has nothing to do with them." Zhao Hanzhang frowned slightly and opened her eyes. She pushed away Wang's other hand and pretended to vomit twice before lifting her head to reach out to Qinggu on the ground. Qinggu was taken aback for a moment before realizing it. She quickly got up and shook her hands slightly, holding a teacup for Sanyang. Zhao Hanzhang rinsed his mouth and spat it out, then his face turned pale. He leaned against Wang's shirt and looked at Zhao Ji, with a slight tilt at the corner of his mouth. "Is this Uncle De Tang?" The stagnant atmosphere inside the room suddenly became active, and the servants kneeling on the ground felt their momentum weaken. They could lift their heads slightly. Zhao Hanzhang woke up and vomited, directly disrupting Zhao Ji's rhythm. Zhao Ji stared at Zhao Hanzhang and frowned slightly. "Sanyang, you are becoming less polite. Who taught you to talk to elders like this?" Zhao Hanzhang looked innocent and said, "I don't remember." She smiled at Zhao Ji and slightly lifted her chin, saying, "I don't remember you, I don't remember. These people behind you, except." Her gaze was fixed on Zhao Dalong, with a smile on her face. He. Zhao Dalong. Although their cousins are only 1 year apart, they are the two closest in age in the mansion, but they are not so familiar. He doesn't remember when he did something that left a deep impression on her, to the extent that she has lost her memory and still remembers him. But it's okay if we don't remember. "Can we introduce ourselves again?" Zhao Hanzhang said, feeling generous and not averse to getting to know them again. "However, this seems like my yard, isn't it a big house?" Zhao Hanzhang tilted his head in confusion and looked at Zhao Ji. "Can the second house now directly handle the servants of the big house by bypassing the head lady of the big house?" See you tomorrow, end of this chapter. Chapter 7. Relativity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Relativity. She raised the corner of her mouth slightly and asked maliciously, "Now, isn't Uncle Zhao in charge of the family?" Zhao Ji's face changed, and Wu and his 3 children looked at Zhao Hanzhang in surprise. They didn't expect her to dare to say such words to her face. Wang couldn't help but look at Zhao Hanzhang in surprise and gently tugged at her sleeve. Zhao Hanzhang remained unaware and looked at Zhao Ji with a smile, waiting for his answer. Zhao Jiping regained his composure for a moment, his anger quickly calmed down and he said calmly, "Sanyang just woke up. She didn't remember anything about the family, so she misunderstood. I did this for the sake of peace in the mansion. If the servants were to spread rumors casually, even the best master would be provoked by them." Zhao Hanzhang nodded slightly and said, "Uncle Tang is right. We really need to investigate carefully. Although I don't remember many things, I have gained a lot of knowledge after waking up. When we calculate, all the rumors and gossip outside seem to be spreading from outside the big room to inside. If we want to investigate, we need to investigate the root. Let Uncle Tang and his mother investigate together. My mother will investigate the big room, and Aunt Tang will investigate the second room. Let's see which servants are stirring up trouble and send them out together. What does Uncle Tang think?" Zhao Hanzhang grew up under his nose from a young age. He knew that this child was intelligent, but she was always gentle and obedient, and it was the first time she had refuted his face in this way. However, in response to Zhao Hanzhang's unfamiliar gaze, Zhao Ji couldn't even get angry and could only reluctantly respond. In the end, the medical visit came to an end. They only left the medicinal herbs they brought and left without saying a few words. Quickly walking out of Qingyi Pavilion, Zhao Jiming stopped and turned to look at Qingyi Pavilion under the dim light. Wu Shi, who followed him with a quick step, was startled and stopped with the three children, standing with their heads down. Zhao Ji said expressionlessly, "She's afraid she's not pretending, but she's really losing her memory." Wu nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, yes, I didn't see her before and thought she was pretending, but today I see that it's actually true." Although San Yang occasionally rebelled before, she acted steadily and had a good relationship with their second wife. No matter what she thought in her heart, the two families had always been very harmonious on the surface. A rude questioning like today has never happened before. Zhao Ji had a headache and realized that fake amnesia was not good for Zhao Sanyang, and real amnesia was even more detrimental to them. Amnesia, not remembering, then there is no emotion, no fear, and the previous management instantly disappears. And tonight Zhao Ji felt a pain in his heart as he thought about her confrontation just now. He felt flustered and said, "I don't want to share what happened earlier." Wu whispered, "Even if we don't say it, will we still pass it on to the main courtyard?" "Of course I will." As soon as they walked forward, Zhao Hanzhang let the kneeling servants up with his hind legs and asked them all to step back, leaving only Qinggu to say, "The doctor hasn't arrived yet. Qinggu should go to the main courtyard and tell my grandfather that I woke up, but I felt dizzy and nauseous, and it's not a big deal anymore." On the other hand, my mother was so angry that she felt a pain in her heart. She asked, "If my grandfather asks why my mother is angry, do you know how to respond?" "How else can we respond?" "Of course, it's because of their second-room anger." However, Qinggu cautiously glanced at Zhao Hanzhang and, combining her previous teachings with Sanyang's, whispered, "Just say she was angry with Sanyang. Sanyang is rude to the old master." Zhao Hanzhang nodded slightly and said, "Just say, Sanyang has forgotten all the previous etiquette and morals, and Nyang is extremely angry." Wang. She's actually not very angry. In the past, she was the only one in their family of three who was angry with someone in the second room. Her son was foolish and couldn't care about it, and although her daughter was shrewd, she always asked her to be patient and said something. She always gets angry when it's important, and if she gets angry again in the future, it won't be worth taking seriously. My daughter rarely gets angry in the second room, and Wang only feels refreshed and refreshed. She hesitated and said, "Isn't that a bad thing to say? In case your grandfather gets angry with you." "Anger is inevitable, but I think my grandfather must not be more angry with me," Zhao Hanzhang said with a slight curl of his mouth and a nod of his knee. In recent years, the big house has raised the heart of the second house. The big Hall uncle's family is too proud, realizing that their title is already in their possession. How could they be so proud that they will not be defeated? She said, "I am certain that the incident that led Erlang out of the city was done privately by the elder sister and the others. The eldest uncle and the others were unaware, otherwise they would definitely stop him. They wouldn't think that their grandfather would pass on the title to Erlang. It is precisely because they are convinced of this that even if they know that our siblings are injured and cannot be separated from the elder sister, they are not in a hurry. They even took action to wipe off their tails and refuse to admit it. Anyway, my grandfather will not give the title to Erlang." Wang was sad and upset. Why not give Erlang? Erlang is his own grandson. Zhao Hanzhang said. "Mother, Erlang only knows how to write his own name. How can he be a good head of the family? Being a nobleman is not a good thing for him, but rather a deadly evil. Why are you still talking to the second room like that? Didn't you tell me to endure it before?" Zhao Hanzhang said, "At that time, I thought we were all in the same lineage and grew up together since childhood, always having feelings." She said, when our upper and lower teeth are still touching each other, it's normal for our family to live a noisy life. We can just tolerate trivial things, but now it seems that their hearts are too big and they are too lenient. It's impossible to rely on them anymore. Wang was stunned and said, they don't want titles, and they can't rely on them. So we. Mother, a title is just an honor. There are many good things in this world. We don't want that dazzling title. I don't say we don't want anything else, Zhao Hanzhang said. And those things are still in my grandfather's hands now. Wang's eyes lit up and he said, money. Her father-in-law is known for being stingy and has a reputation for being skilled in business, so he must have a lot of money in his hands. At this moment, only the mother, son, and Qinggu were left in the room. Zhao Hanzhang said meaningfully, money is just secondary. The most important thing is the person in Zhao Changyu's hands. In times of chaos, money and food are important, but people are also important. Whoever has people and food in their hands can live and live well. Now the entire Jin dynasty is in a mess, and even Luoyang, which looks stable now, has only undergone bloodshed. Before, there was a turmoil every 3 to 5 months, and the city of Luoyang has been bloodshed time and time again without any manpower. Zhao Hanzhang felt that he dared not even leave the gate. So she coveted the person in Zhao Changyu's hand. Qinggu instantly understood and knew what to say. She was also shrewd and wiped her eyes, making them red a bit. Then she bent her knees and said to Zhao Hanzhang, I will not disappoint what Sanyang entrusted me. She turned around and left. See you at 8 p.m. tonight. I'm looking for recommended tickets, monthly tickets, and various types of tickets. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Consort. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Consort Wang stared blankly, still unable to regain consciousness. Zhao Erlang endured and couldn't help it anymore. He tugged at Zhao Hanzhang's sleeve and said wrongly, Sister, can we eat now? I'm hungry. Zhao Hanzhang looked at Zhao Erlang, who was naive and ignorant, and waved his hand, saying, Eat, eat. Zhao Erlang immediately returned to his seat and handed several large pieces of meat to Zhao Hanzhang, saying attentively, Sister, you just vomited. I'll give you all of this to eat. Zhao Hanzhang looked at the big meat in the bowl without speaking, feeling a headache and chest tightness, nauseous. Wang quickly picked up the meat and said, Your sister won't eat it, you can eat it yourself. She looked anxiously at Zhao Hanzhang, Sanyang, why don't you eat some white porridge? Look at it, and your face will turn white. The huge memories that surged out of her mind had almost fused together. Zhao Hanzhang's head didn't hurt much anymore, but she didn't have a good appetite either, so she nodded. She sat and watched as Wang brought dishes to Zhao Erlang, who also ate them with relish, eating everything that was placed in the bowl. Zhao Hanzhang found it interesting and asked him, Can you also eat so well in the ancestral hall? Zhao Erlang shook his head wrongly. There is no meat, only mantu. Zhao Hanzhang nodded in satisfaction, just like being punished. The Qingyi pavilion has quieted down, but the main courtyard is not at all calm. Qinggu knelt down and cried for a moment, only to get up with permission and quietly retreat with her back arched. When she left the yard, her back was wet with sweat. Zhao Chanyu sat cross-legged on the couch without moving. Chengbo brought a bowl of tea and whispered, Master Lang, the second room is indeed out of place tonight. Zhao Chanyu sighed and said, It's not just that the second wife is out of line, but the third wife is also out of line. Without waiting for Chengbo to speak, he said again, But it's understandable. I always knew that my second son had some opinions about me, but I didn't expect it to have affected Zhao Ji's behavior. Now that I'm still here, he can treat the Wang family like this. Once I leave, how can they, orphans and widows, have a foothold in the Zhao family? I didn't know the situation was so severe, he sighed. Do you think Sanyang's move was just a way to express her resentment? She's forcing me to make a choice. Zhao Changyu smiled and said, "She's actually smart." Qingbo remained silent. "You said the bad things, and you also said the good things. Anyway, you will always make up for your granddaughter." He silently placed the tea bowl in front of Zhao Changyu. Zhao Changyu took a sip and pondered, "Actually, there's no choice. I'm not someone with great righteousness." Qingbo hurriedly said, "Why is Lord Lang so self-deprecating?" Zhao Changyu, however, was very calm and said, "This is the truth. If I were righteous, at this time, for the long-term development of the family, I should send you to scold Sanyang. The power of the family can only be concentrated together to help the Zhao family further. In this chaotic era, we should not disperse the family's power, and Zhao Changyu sighed, what we need to do now is to divide the family's power." After talking to Sanyang, Zhao Changyu has been hesitating. How much should he leave for Sanyang? According to the original plan, he had no intention of distributing family power to her, and even had no intention of leaving anyone for the mansion except for Qingbo. Sun Tzu is foolish, even if he doesn't want to admit it. Zhao Erlang is indeed mentally disabled. The 12-year-old boy has no communication problems, but his mind is no different from that of a 6 or 7-year-old child. He can still recognize 100 words at the age of 6 or 7. After reading for 6 years, he can count the words he knows with just one hand. With the example of Emperor Hui, it was impossible for Zhao Changyu to give him his family business. So what he has always wanted is for the second house to inherit the family business and entrust the big house to their care. In the past 2 years, the situation in North Korea has changed, and the conflict between the big house and the second house has deepened. He saw it in his eyes and was anxious in his heart, which is why he wanted to give the big house another guarantee. So he began to search for a high family marriage for his granddaughter. He had power, money, and people in his hands, and he wanted to arrange for Sanyang before leaving. In the future, she would have a husband's family to rely on, and she could also take care of her mother and younger brother. Who knew that there was only a slight sign of him here, and rumors spread throughout the mansion, causing trouble for Erlang in Sanyang. Tonight, where is the second room forcing the first room? It is clear that Sanyang is forcing him to make a decision. Although Zhao Changyu knew she had dug a pit, he had to step forward. After thinking for a while, Zhao Changyu made a decision and said to Qingbo, "Let Zhao Ju and Ji Yuan come to see me tomorrow." Qingbo bowed and said, "Yes." Zhao Hanzhang thought that Zhao Changyu still needed to struggle for a while. After all, her grandfather was a famous capable minister in history, who could be called 1,000 zhang pine and a pillar of the world. Such people, even if they want to show favoritism, will still struggle for a period of time. Between the family's big plan and the small family bloodline, most scholars in this era will choose the family, let alone visionary people like Zhao Changyu. She didn't expect that the next day at noon, when he was about to have lunch, Qingbo brought someone to pick her up. The groom cares about the girl, so he asked the slave to come and pick her up for a conversation. She said. Zhao Hanzhang nodded and sat on the carriage, only to realize that Qingbo didn't call her Sanyang just now, but called her a girl. Her mouth couldn't help but curl upwards, not even pressing down when she entered the main courtyard. This time, she shouted at the middle-aged man sitting in the yard without any psychological burden, "Grandfather." Zhao Changyu nodded at her and introduced the two people next to her when she arrived. "It's just the right time to come and see you, Grandpa Ji," he said. Zhao Hanzhang looked over and saw a fair and gentle expression on his face. He looked like a young man in his 30s who couldn't even shout out. Zhao Changyu frowned slightly as he saw her staring blankly at someone, Sanyang. Zhao Hanzhang immediately leaned over and called out, "Mr. Ji." Ji Yuan's eyes lit up and he nodded slightly. "The girl seems to be in good spirits today," he said. Zhao Changyu looked at Zhao Hanzhang with some surprise, but did not correct her. Instead, he smiled and said, "She has been honest since childhood, and Ziyuan knows that Jier only left 2 children. Like Erlang, I couldn't help but raise her like a man." Ji Yuan remained silent. Zhao Changyu did not need him to make an immediate decision and said to Zhao Hanzhang, "Sanyang, Mr. Ji is my grandfather's right arm. You will treat him equally with my grandfather in the future." Upon hearing this, Zhao Hanzhang's face became serious. He stood up and forced himself to stop, then bowed deeply to Ji Yuan and said, "Ji grandfather." Zhao Changyu. "There's no need for that." Ji Yuan's eyes lit up, and he excitedly reached out to help her. "Good child, you don't need to be polite if you hurt your leg. Sit down quickly," he said. "If Grandpa Ji doesn't sit, how dare Sanyang sit? Please take a seat, too." Zhao Changyu's forehead twitched with veins, and he quickly interrupted the two. "This is Zhao Ju, my grandfather's left arm." Zhao Hanzhang looked over and saw that his height was already very modern. He should be 1.823 meters tall, and his martial arts were powerful. It was spring now, and the temperature in Luoyang was still low. However, he was only wearing a simple hu costume, and the fabric was pressed against his body, revealing his sense of strength. Zhao Changyu said, "He is in charge of the family affairs." Zhao Hanzhang's heart moved, with every word and every martial arts. Is Zhao Changyu going to give her all his family? See you tomorrow, end of this chapter. Chapter 9. Two Roads. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This translator is experiencing an error, please try another translator. Chapter 10. Mutual Compromise. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Mutual Compromise. Is it possible that the person possessed by Professor Fu is an unknown and insignificant figure, so there is no news coming out? Zhao Hanzhang said, "There is no specific person, it's just that before I fell into a coma, I saw a commotion at the city gate, and it seemed that many people were injured. I wanted to ask if anyone has the same amnesia as me. If there are too many people with amnesia, maybe this matter will be spread more widely in the capital." Zhao Changyu's face turned black, and Ji Yuan couldn't help but laugh out loud. He said to Zhao Hanzhang, "Sanyang, your amnesia has been suppressed by the Langzhu, there is no rumor." Zhao Hanzhang looked at Zhao Changyu in surprise and said, "Why?" Zhao Changyu looked at her quietly, lowered her head, and said, "If you want more things, just be quiet this time. Don't always think about teasing the second room. Don't forget why I took the character Hanzhang for you." Zhao Hanzhang obediently agreed, but felt that Zhao Changyu was destined to be disappointed. She had brought this name for 20.8 years, and although she had gained virtue, she did not learn much from humility. It's difficult to expect her to possess virtues like this name without boasting. Zhao Hanzhang's mouth slightly curled up, and he remembered her father driving her away from 2 courtyards with a stick. Her eyes were slightly wet, she lowered her head to cover the tears in her eyes, and once again agreed, "I listened to my grandfather." It seems that the matter of connecting information with Professor Fu through amnesia is no longer possible. We still need to send someone out to inquire about the person who was injured at the city gate that day. Zhao Hanzhang's mood improved, and when she looked up again, her eyes had calmed down. Her gaze fell on Ji Yuan and she smiled at him obediently and sweetly. Ji Yuan felt a chill in his spine and suddenly had a bad premonition. Zhao Changyu's purpose today is to allow Zhao Hanzhang to meet Zhao Ju and Ji Yuan. By now, they had already met and knew each other well, so he left Zhao Hanzhang to speak alone. Zhao Changyu said, "Although Qianli is a martial artist, he is steady and meticulous in his character. Erlang is not good at reading, but he has a lot of strength. He doesn't ask much, unlike Ji Yuan. I originally intended to leave him and Cheng Bo with you and Erlang." Zhao Hanzhang reacted for a moment before remembering that Zhao Ju, with the character Qianli, was still given to him by Zhao Changyu. As soon as this knowledge point is remembered, relevant memories emerge. Zhao Hanzhang had never seen Ji Yuan, but had seen Zhao Ju several times from afar. Erlang's martial arts were learned from him. However, compared to Ji Yuan, Zhao Ju appears relatively unknown. Ji Yuan, a famous advisor by her grandfather's side, although the little girl had never seen him, she had heard of his name frequently. The Zhao family was able to stand up amidst the mutual attacks of several feudal lords, and her grandfather's ability was an important reason, but there was also the assistance of Ji Yuan. Ji Yuan. Zhao Changyu paused for a moment and said, "He is different from Qianli, but he has received my favor. He is still young now, and I'm afraid he won't stay with you for too long. So you need to cultivate your own manpower as soon as possible to replace him." Zhao Hanzhang's heart moved and he said, "Grandfather, can I go out?" Zhao Changyu's gaze fell on her lap. Zhao Hanzhang immediately said, "This is not a problem. My leg is sprained and cracked, and there is no fracture. I think I can go out." Zhao Changyu said meaningfully, "Aren't you experiencing amnesia now? You're also seriously injured. It's because of amnesia that we need to go out for more walks, so that we can recover our memories faster." Zhao Changyu said. "Are you really planning to argue with Second Fang? It's about enough. Let's find a time to restore our memory." Zhao Changyu stood up and went to the bookshelf to take out a box. "I'll leave some property for you and Erlang," he said. "There are 4 land deeds and 4 maps in the box, and the pictures are drawn on silk cloth." Zhao Changyu took out 2 land deeds and 2 maps to give to her. "This is the way I left for Zhao. I was supposed to give it to your uncle, but now I divide it in half, and this one is yours." After taking a glance at the land deed, Zhao Hanzhang went to look at the map and said, "What is this?" "This is the treasure that I have hidden," Zhao Changyu sighed and said, "Great Jin. I'm afraid it won't be long. The world will eventually become chaotic, and now with the rebellion of the Xiongnu and Chang people, the situation is not even comparable to that of the later Han dynasty. At that time, human life will be like grass mustard. As long as you have money and food, you can gather talents to protect yourself. This is something left for you to protect your life." Zhao Hanzhang's gaze fell on the box. Seeing this, Zhao Changyu's temple couldn't help but jump. He reached out to cover the box and said, "This is for the family." After pausing for a moment, he said, "Although these things are my business income, you should know that my grandfather also inherited the family business of his ancestors, and only with a foundation can we have today. Therefore, these things must be given back to the family." Zhao Hanzhang expressed his understanding and said generously, "I know, this is our responsibility." Zhao Changyu nodded in satisfaction and gestured for her to put away the things. "I'll have Cheng Bo take you back. When the crown prince's seal is down, I'll take you out to meet the person left for you." Ji Yuan and Zhao Ju were fortunate enough to come to the mansion, so it would be difficult for other people to meet in the mansion. Otherwise, even if the main courtyard is tightly sealed, it wouldn't be possible to hide it from the second room. Zhao Changyu reminded her again, "Do you know how to be humble? You are also a girl, showing weakness makes it easier to win trust." Zhao Hanzhang, however, did not think so. "In the first 6 years, we have been showing weakness all along. I only saw that when we took a step back, others would take 2 steps forward, step by step pressing, becoming more and more reckless." She said, "If we don't let it go from the beginning, perhaps it's a different situation, and today's disaster may not be eliminated directly." Zhao Changyu frowned. Zhao Hanzhang did not explain much. In Zhao Changyu's eyes, the current situation was not bad to the end. After all, this incident was not dangerous, but Zhao Hanzhang knew that there was a life lying between them. The 14-year-old girl died before she could even express her thoughts. No one knew about her death except for her. Zhao Hanzhang withdrew his gaze from the box and took a step back. "I understand my grandfather's meaning. Although I am not happy in my heart, I will compromise for the sake of the overall situation and the family." Zhao Changyu then relaxed his brows and nodded to her satisfaction, "Not bad. Only then can I trust you to hand over those people. With your current nature and ability, you should be able to stay in Jiyuan for a few years. The grandparents and grandchildren chatted happily for a while, and Zhao Hanzhang returned with a full load. What she received today was the big head left by Zhao Changyu, and the 2 land deeds and things under the map were half or even more of what Zhao Changyu had accumulated throughout his life, and this is something in the dark. He will definitely not tell Second Fong about the existence and whereabouts of these things, so he will definitely give her some things to put on the surface. Zhao Hanzhang raised his lips and sat on the carriage, looking towards the direction where the second room was located. The little girl's elder sister, Zhao Auntie, was still kneeling in the temple, right? I don't know if it was her own idea or someone who instigated them to leave the city. The little girl's revenge must be avenged, and she also needs to arrange for Wang and Zhao Erlang, and then find Professor Fu to come up with a way back together. See you tomorrow. End of this chapter.